Come on, Livingston. We gotta go on and on and on. Together we can make it. We gotta go on and on and on. Come on, Livingston.
Knocks it through. Mullen bursting into the box. Josh Mullen.
Together we can make it.
Mullen's ball across, it's turned in! It's Pittman who's got it! Livingston leads!
Can they get the ball back in? O'Brien. Lead! And Livingston have the lead! Man, can score.
If we march together.
The full-time whistle blows and David Hayes celebrates. And the Livingston fans join in exultation.
Come on, Livingston.
Livingston have the lead against Rangers, and they are certainly rising to a few occasions on their return to the top flight in Scotland.
Come on, Livingston. We gotta go.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Livi, the podcast dedicated to everything Livingston Football Club and Scottish football, and proudly sponsored by Strana Apparel. My name's Euan, and today I'm joined by the best David Arquette lookalike about. Angus, how we doing?
You've used that twice now. You used it on Twitter and you've used it here. Is there a bit of repetition, a bit of recycling going on here?
I was fully expecting to come on this Zoom call and just see Ghostface chasing you about in the background.
Wow, I can't believe I'm taking that. But yeah, I guess I'm not doing too bad. Maybe a little worse now, but it doesn't seem as if it's been too long. Obviously, the gaps between the football season ending and the League Cup starting doesn't seem to get any longer. But it's good to be back. It's good to have the ongoings of the cinch back in our lives. Hopefully, it's going to be a smoother one for us than it has been for some other teams so far in this campaign. I think it shows that we've had a couple of meltdowns from a couple of teams in our league already this season, in the system this season. So it's going to be a cracking one. But yeah, how about yourself, Ian? How are you doing?
Oh, good, mate. I believe you were also pretty successful over the summer with the GS boys. You also won a couple of wee awards at their awards night too.
Yeah, not bad. Winning the British Cup as a team against Preston North End, absolutely massive. And then getting Player of the Year as well, which is a massive kind of honour. Play for a successful team and having a kind of players vote for that. So yeah, very very chuffed with that. Obviously our season kind of only finished not too long ago as well, and we're already back at it as well. So yeah, if there's anybody listening who would like to come and join along, even yourself, and get along, get a couple of minutes under your belt.
Well, congratulations to all the boys at GS. I'll pass on that. I get paid on a Saturday to go and coach, so I'm not giving that up quite yet. But yeah, it's been a busy summer for myself as well. Managed to make a little jaunt out to Norway for the Scotland game, which was fantastic in the end, albeit I ended up going via Amsterdam, which was not planned. But yeah, that was a fantastic trip, and also I've been in the process of buying a house with my girlfriend as well. So yeah, it's been all go over the summer months, but also glad to get back to the football. And as always, you can find this episode as well as all our others on your preferred podcast streaming site. Just search for Talk Livi, so follow us or subscribe to ensure that you don't miss another episode.
We'll kick things off by looking back at our first competitive games of the campaign as the Lions progressed top of their group in the League Cup.
And we'll discuss all the comings and goings at the Tony Macaroni Arena over the summer and where we think we still need to strengthen.
And finally, Euan caught up with Glen Schreuder from Red Tinted Glasses to get an insight into our visitors on opening day, Aberdeen.
The Lions have been back in action in the League Cup with trips to Brecon and Cove and home games with Hamilton and Clyde. First of all, just before we go into detail on the League Cup games, Angus, where you've obviously taken in a few of the pre-season games as well. We had games at home to Queen of the South, Alloa, trip away to Rangers, also had behind closed doors game against Carlisle, along with a trip to Lesser Hampden, which was another ground ticked off for me, and a new stadium. Then the roof leaks is always impressive in Scottish football. But kind of what were the early signs that you noticed in those pre-season games going into the competitive fixtures?
Going back to a kind of five at the back and trying to get sorted into that, I think that was the immediate thing that we were obviously trying to target and trying to get a wee bit more used to playing. I think we tried it a couple of times last season, and I think we know exactly how it went. A couple of 3-0s at half times where we went to a back five. This is a slightly different kind of shape though, as in the back five, and it's sort of like a 2-2 and then a 1, as opposed to like a kind of 3-2 that we were kind of playing, as opposed to the back five there, which has been kind of interesting because I think one of the issues that we'd probably been lacking last season was wide players. Apart from probably Joel Nupley, he was only a kind of mainstay in our team who would be playing outside on the flanks. So I don't know if that's partly to kind of remedy that, whilst also benefiting the likes of Christian Montano and that on the wing back positions, freeing up space for them. And I think for me, watching being at the Queen of the South game, the Alloa game, and then just kind of keeping track of like the others as well. I think that seems to be the main thing that we're looking at. And in all honesty, being a bit solid was the thing that kind of came out from that. I think we didn't concede a goal until the last of the pre-season friendlies, that one against Carlisle United, which is some going, especially playing like Rangers away. And obviously, I know it's like a bounce game and stuff like that, but you look at the quality that they'll always have, and to go there and to give a good account of yourselves is always a good showing. But I think that for us, Euan, is what we kind of need to be this season, is a wee bit more solid. Even if we're going to be, slightly unspectacular, I don't think we can go through another season where we're conceding, around 60 goals in a campaign. I don't think that would do us any good. So I think that was something that needed to be identified and remedied as soon as possible.
I fortunately had the opportunity of speaking to the gaffer yesterday, which will get released hopefully later on this week. But that was a big thing that he spoke about. He thought second half of the season we were too soft, and he actually alluded to the games against St Mirren, Motherwell away from home, when we played against a kind of two up top, and he was saying more teams are starting to play like that with two up top, and that was a big reason why he's been looking at going to a back three, because the goals against column last year wasn't good enough. I think it's our worst since being back in the top flight, so it was something that desperately needed addressed. And fair play to the manager, he's certainly looked at trying to plug that gap. We'll come on to the kind of comings and goings. Obviously, Mikey Devlin's come in, on paper, very good signing, who should hopefully, if we can get him out on the pitch regularly enough, will make a big difference in that aspect. Michael Nottingham as well coming in, who's another big physical presence. And then even in front of that, Mo Sangari as well as a big physical unit. So you can see Davies' thought process of trying to make us that little bit more solid. But a kind of theme I noticed in a more attacking sense, even with playing the three at the back, is granted we've had wing backs and the likes of Penners, Montano, Brandon's played out there as well, but it's the centre backs getting involved as well at times and kind of overlapping in some scenarios. That's a wee bit different, and it's certainly, you could tell that it had been worked on over pre-season in terms of the patterns of play and getting them involved in the game. So gives us another kind of output going forward. But obviously that relies on kind of the centre midfielders maybe dropping in to help protect a little bit and plug those gaps, just in case of counter-attacks and things like that, if your centre-back's caught up at the byline putting a cross in. So yeah, as you say, it's almost like a 3-4-2-1 with two kind of inverted tens, and might see us get the best out of Stephen Kelly this season. Stephen Kelly last year was kind of pushed about a little bit to fit into the side and almost plug gaps, playing out on the left-hand side for parts of the season last year, but he's an out-and-out number 10, I would say, Stephen Kelly, and getting him into that sort of area of the pitch. We were up at the game at Cove, and you could see the quality that he brings to the team in those kind of areas and pockets of the pitch. So that's going to be important going forward. But let's get on to the competitive business now, Angus. I wasn't able to make the game up at Brechin. It was your first time to go and see the famous Hedge. How did you think we fared against Highland League champions Brechin?
In all honesty, Ewan, that game was sort of nothing kind of more than kind of a pre-season friendly, to be honest. The gulf between the two teams was, pretty clear. And that kind of led to us just kind of having most of the ball and just kind of, knocking it about and stuff like that, trying to find the gaps and stuff. And yeah, I think because of that, you can kind of see that it wasn't necessarily the game played at the best intensity or whatever like that. It's hard to kind of decide how we were going to be playing against a team like that who, realistically should be kind of turning up and sweeping aside. But regarding that as well, it's good to see that we did go up there and it was, that professional kind of performance that it was, solid. We didn't just take it for granted. We made sure that the job was done, and then that eventually allowed us to start being a wee bit more attacking as well. That was the first time you could kind of see some of the new players in action as well, and I think that the standout in that match, in all honesty, was actually Devlin, just from a pure leadership standpoint, in all honesty, just listening to him chatting and communicating throughout the entire game. It wasn't like a massive crowd in that there. You could just hear him every 2 seconds barking instructions, making sure everybody knew exactly where to be. So I think that's the thing that most people would probably taken away from that game, to be honest with you, even though we scored, 3 good goals. Joel Newblake gets the first goal of the campaign after, Jason opens the ball in the middle of the park. It's a good finish by Joel. Sean Kelly steps up to win a free kick into the top corner as well, before going on to set up a header for Christian Montano as well. So, yeah, solid afternoon's work. Nothing to kind of write home about, and just putting us in good stead into the rest of the group campaign.
Yeah, it's one of those fixtures where you can't really win as the Premiership side. You could go there and win 5-6-0, and it's Highland League Brecon. But you go there and maybe struggle a little bit, as you say. It's got that kind of still early doors of the season. It almost has a pre-season vibe to it a little bit. But the fact of the matter is, you go there and you get the job done, and it's pretty comfortable in the end, winning 3-0. Carbon copy of 2 years ago when we opened up the season away at Brecon as well. So you can only go and beat the opposition that are in front of you, and we managed to do that. A couple of positives I would say to take from that game. Obviously, I wasn't there to kind of physically see it, but I think a big plus point was seeing Caelan Ledingham come on the pitch, young 16-year-old coming through our academy, which is fantastic to see. Last year we saw Lucas Stenhouse making the bench a handful of times. So it's good to see that there is that pathway into the first team. And I think Caelan Ledingham's the youngest player that we've had since Matthew Knox made his debut a few years ago. So that's a really good positive sign for the football club. And obviously he's been involved training with the first team as well. So that's a big positive for me. But as you say, when you're at these grounds like Brecon, you get that opportunity to kind of be right up and close with the players, and you can kind of hear the chat on the pitch a lot. I remember when Nicky Devlin first signed and we were away at Alloa, and you got that vibe straight away talking about the leadership qualities. And you've obviously cottoned on with that with Mikey Devlin. I've noticed that in the games that I've been to that he's played as well. So it means it's not that big a surprise that Mikey Devlin's been given the armband for the season when you talk about him like that and those leadership qualities. But we followed that game up. Hamilton Accies at home. Safe to say that was a sketchy performance, would be the best way to put it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wasn't really great, to be honest with you, Euan. And to be honest, in all honesty, I think that for the most part of this kind of campaign, it could be described as this kind of way, apart from maybe the second half against Cove, where, yeah, kind of got enough of the ball and stuff like that to damage teams, but not really creating a massive amount to, to properly capitalise on it. The first half against Hamilton, I think, may have been a little bit of a worrisome sign if we hadn't bounced back from it, and kind of like took control more so in the second half. The way that they were knocking the ball about in that first half was, genuinely really impressive. I think that they deserve a lot of credit for, what they've done this season, or the recruitment that they've done to be able to get themselves to a decent standard, because they were knocking the ball about incredibly well, better than a lot of teams I've seen in the top flight in the last couple of seasons. But we went 1-0 down against them, and it would take us until the last minute to equalise, and then of course penalty shootout is only going to go one way for us, isn't it? But again, I think that's a game it does kind of scream Viaplay Cup for a Premiership side. In all honesty, I think every team in the top flight has one of those kind of games per year. Some have more than that, if you're the likes of St Johnstone or that in this campaign. But yeah, I think first game back in front of the fans competitively. Yeah, it just didn't click, and I guess we've talked about how there's plenty of new signings coming into the team, a new shape and all that. And I think it's just something that we're probably going to have to get. The teams are still getting used to kind of playing with one another, and hopefully those kind of teething problems will be disappearing quite soon. Again, it's a team who we've had most of the ball against, and it's probably going to be a different story come the Premiership games. But you'd still like to see yourselves do a little bit more in these instances, I would say.
Yeah, you talk about that. It's a common theme in these League Cup games. I think there's only one season where we've got maximum points from our group, which was the year we ended up reaching the final, which was all behind closed doors. So that tells you that it's not a nailed-on certainty that you're going to pick up maximum points. And I think the only team this year that picked up maximum points was Airdrie. So again, all the Premiership sides had dropped points during the group stage. So it's not that big a surprise, I would say. I have to give a lot of credit to Hamilton Accies. I was really, really impressed with how they knocked the ball about, in particular in that first 45 minutes. And if that's the standard that they're going to be playing at for the season, I think they're in a right good chance of coming back up at the first attempt in League One, back to the Championship. But yeah, to kind of talk about us, it was a lot of huff and puff first half. No kind of fluidity, no kind of flow to how we played. And the goal was probably a big wake-up call for us. I think we probably started to try and get a bit more of a foothold in the game after that. Second half, we dominated the ball, but it was kind of all huff and puff. There wasn't a lot of kind of clear-cut opportunities being created. Christian Montano hit the post, one effort from the edge of the box, and we do manage to get the equaliser in the end. Bruce pops up at the back post to slam it into the back of the net, and then we almost snatched it in normal time with Stephen Kelly's free kick, which crashed off the crossbar. But as you say, one of the Achilles heels from last season was when it came down to penalties, and I couldn't help but laugh. And this wasn't a dig at Mikey Devlin or Joel Newbley when they missed their penalties, but I couldn't help but laugh in the stand when we missed another penalty. Can you offer not to take them? Just in general, if you get given them, can you just... Because this is going to be a theme when we come on to the Clyde game as well. We're going to talk about a penalty miss again. So can we just
do you think that if you're like a opposing team against us this season, anytime you get us into the box, just take us down for a penalty, because there's more chance of the ball probably like hitting about 7 different players and then just slightly rolling across the line than it is us scoring a penalty.
Yeah, I think you're going to see an alarming amount of VAR penalties for handball given to Livingston at this rate, because teams that's going to be their best form of defence against us, is to gift us a penalty. I've never seen anything like it. And normally when you get a penalty, you think, what an opportunity this is to, get a goal or whatnot. And with us, it just seems like a curse. It's an absolute curse just now. And I mean, again, chatting to the manager and listening to his comments after the Clyde game in particular, I think he's just absolutely dumbfounded as to what to do about it. Short of putting himself on the pitch to take one. I think he's closely running out of ideas on what to do. But yeah, we ended up losing the shootout. Stephen Kelly did stick away his spot kick, which was a rarity for us to see a penalty scored by a Livingston player. But I think the biggest positive you can probably take from the Hamilton Accies game is the fact that we kept plugging away second half after being a goal down and weren't playing at our best, but we managed to rescue a result from the game in the end, scoring a late goal. So I think that's the biggest positive you can take from it. As you mentioned, the fact that there's a couple of new players featuring for us, we're playing a different system. There's inevitably going to be teething problems along the way with that. And that's probably the best analysis you can give of the Hamilton Accies game. It was probably just a few of those teething problems settling in. But as I say, there's positives to take in that we plugged away and managed to get that equaliser. But we certainly responded from that performance and result against Cove. And I have to say, for the most part, very, very good performance, in particular in the second half. We were excellent.
Especially the second half was night and day, to be honest. The first half still maybe somewhat of the same game of issues, kind of try to break the team down. But again, I think, once it starts to click, it's going to work. And I think that showed in the second half. I think, the first half, you're trying to get used to like the different runs and that players are trying to make and stuff, and it just wasn't coming off. We managed to get a goal before half time, and that just seemed to, take a weight off the shoulders. And in the second half, you could just see how, relaxed and how dominant we were. And, it was actually, probably the most enjoyable we've been to watch since before the World Cup. the way that we were knocking the ball about, the big chances that we created, scoring, 5 goals is great. Also, them being, pretty decent goals of that standard as well, on top of, plenty of other chances that we probably maybe unlucky to not have, maybe even like 6 or 7 goals. So that definitely made the trip up there much more worthwhile. I think, after that game against Hamilton, you're going up there and you're thinking, away game against a team in the same league, is it going to be much the same? But, the team showed, great resilience and, bounced back from it in the best way possible, which was very, very pleasing to see. And, a couple of great goals. The two by Stephen Kelly, absolutely tremendous finishes. Even Anderson's header, good goals to actually, to have created. And yeah, a step further in the right direction for us.
Yeah, as you say, I think first half, Cove had a couple of half chances, I would say, but on the whole, I still think we probably created the better openings in that first half. There was one from Penrice which he dragged past the post in particular, was a decent opportunity, and I think Joe Newbley had one blocked as well. But you get that goal right on half time, which was probably the difference with the Hamilton game. Hamilton get that first goal and are able to sit in for the remainder of the game. We get that goal and it kind of opens the game up a little bit more for us, and comes from a set play. Oberlai knocks it back across, and Tom Parks loves a goal up north, goals at Brechin, Ross County and Cove. So anytime we head up north, we're expecting a goal from big Tom Parks now. But yeah, fantastic header, puts us 1-0 up at half time. And in second half, as you say, we had opportunities to probably stretch the lead before we did. Jason Holt had one that went just past the post in the second half. Bruce Anderson had a 1v1 as well, which he could have tucked away. And Curtis Guthrie, as the game wore on, had a couple of opportunities too. But get the second goal, another set play, great delivery by Penners, and Oberlai powers in a header. And it's been really good to see Io back in the side as well after his kind of injury struggles second half of last season. So it's been good to see him. And I know Davies mentioned he was probably a bigger miss than they anticipated being last year. But, we kind of took real control of the game, mentioned about those kind of overlapping centre-backs. Who would have ever thought you'd see Tom Parks charging down the byline to go and fire across him for Bruce Anderson? And it's a superb header by Bruce, looping header into the corner. And as you say, Stephen Kelly comes on and scores a couple of absolute crackers, in particular his first goal. Solid 25 yards out, whips it into the top corner, fantastic finish, and his second one really well taken on the volley as well. And it was such a pleasing performance. And I think, granted, it's Brechin and Cove, but given how we were tail end of last season, in particular away from home, I think it's been really pleasing to see us go and score 8 goals on the road and keep a couple of clean sheets. It'll breathe a bit of confidence into the players, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, we've seen all the away goals before the season's even started. That record last year was far from pretty, and hopefully that's something that's been remedied. We've got a couple of tough away games to start the season off, but hopefully we can make a difference there. But going into the final game, Euan, a win against Clyde would basically secure us going through, whether that be top of the table, or that would be in the second place, the best of the second places with our superior goal difference and, reaching double figures on points as well. What did you make of the Clyde game as the last one before heading into this fixture against Aberdeen?
It was a tough watch, is the best way I would put it. It was kind of similar to the Hamilton game. It was a lot of huff and puff, a lack of flow about us. Granted, Clyde offered next to nothing in terms of an attacking sense, but they defended very well, defended their box very well, kept their shape, and made it difficult for us to break them down. Again, I wouldn't say we created an abundance of opportunities, in particular in the first half. Second half, I think we had to up the tempo a little bit and created a couple of opportunities. Curtis Guthrie, Montano forced a good double save from their goalkeeper in the second half, and it's probably a element of fortune about the winning goal from Bruce Anderson. He's taken a pot shot from 25 yards. I think Curtis Guthrie stood, almost jumped over the ball, which has kind of made the keeper see it quite late, and it's found its way into the far bottom corner and gets us in front, and Bruce has got his third goal of the season. And we then shortly afterwards get a penalty, and you know the outcome. It's a save for the keeper. Bruce Anderson stepped up this time, and I know folk on the forum have been crying out for Bruce to hit a penalty, so that'll be them now cursing the fact that they've been tipping Bruce to take a penalty. But we definitely deserved to win the game over the pace. We were the dominant side in the game, albeit it wasn't very pretty to watch. But I think you also need to try and take into consideration in these League Cup games, we're the Premiership side, so the onus is on us to break teams down. We're not going to be playing like that week to week in the Premiership. We're probably going to have less of the ball than what we've had in these games. And it's going to be a very different kind of style from us in terms of how we play. We are going to be the team that's going to be sitting a little bit deeper and wanting teams to come and break us down, and we try and break on them. So it's going to be a flip reverse of what we've been kind of seeing in these League Cup games. So that's why I would urge fans not to get overly concerned by maybe a couple of the performances in these group games.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part. Is going to be that, especially these first 3 games of the season, Aberdeen at home, Rangers away, Hibs away, we're not going to be on the front foot like we have in these. So it's going to be interesting to see what this formation is like, what the personnel is like during these games, when we're going to be properly tested with points on the line and that in the league. So yeah, it's an interesting one. This fight, the League Cup at this kind of stage is always an interesting one, and seeing how teams are going to shape up and stuff like that. I think that it's quite easy to sound like alarm bells and that if things haven't gone well. You look at likes of, we've not had like a campaign that likes of St Johnstone or that have had where you've picked up 3 points from a group that you realistically should be winning. You've got a minus goal and stuff like that. Even the likes of you look at Dundee United, I know they're in the Championship as well, but like losing to like Spartans and that, we've not officially lost a game here, and it could be easy to be all doom and gloom. But I think if you kind of take this as the pre-season kind of exercises, and that obviously it is a little bit more than that because it is part of a cup competition. But yeah, the main thing is that we're through. We've managed to get minutes in the legs. We're starting to work on a shape and stuff like that. Hopefully, it'll do us good for the season starting on Saturday.
The reward for topping our group, albeit unseeded, is a home draw with Ayr United. I don't think you could really ask for a much better draw for the last 16, could you?
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking to avoid your Celtic and Rangers and that straight away anyway, aren't you? So to be able to have another good opportunity to get into what would be the quarterfinals that we would get into after this, if we were to beat getting a team in the lower division is always what you're kind of got to be asking for. Very, very pleased for that as well, and hopefully we can take advantage of that. However, we know all too well about how Championship sides can cause us an upset. I'm just glad that this one isn't against Inverness, so that we've probably got a little bit of a better chance now. This cup has been, the one that we've had better results in compared to, the Scottish Cup. So hopefully that can continue when we play Ayr.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be wary of them regardless, because as you say, we fell victim in the last 16 tie to Inverness last year in the Scottish Cup, but it's a repeat of Davy Martindale's first game in the dugout, a last 16 tie with Ayr United. So hopefully it replicates the same result, which was a 4-0 victory. That would certainly be very pleasing. But yeah, some positives, some things to work on from those League Cup games, but it sets us up well for our Premiership campaign kicking off. We're delighted to have Strana Apparel as sponsors of Talk Livi. UK based with a Swedish soul, we are Strana. Strana is an independent fashion brand from Scotland who create high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces. Inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, all their clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get a premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service.
As a bonus for Talk Livi listeners, you can get 10% off your order using the code TalkLivi at the checkout. We'll also have some exclusive giveaways during the season, so keep your eyes peeled on our socials for those too. And thanks to Sterner for sponsoring Talk Livi. The summer is always that time of year where fans are constantly refreshing their phones to see who the latest rival is at their club, and we're no different. As usual, though, there have been some big names exiting the club, including Nicky Devlin, Jack Fitzwater, Stefan Omionga. You also got Brian Schweik, Jace Kabaya, Jack Hamilton, and Jackson Longridge also leaving the club. Euan, what are your kind of thoughts on and these kind of players moving on? I think for the most part, we were aware that these players would be departing us.
Yeah, I don't think any of the players that have left have come as a surprise. And, I'm sure some of those players may have been offered fresh terms, like Nicky Devlin, Jack Fitzwater, Omionga. I think we're probably offered something, but the likelihood is they've been able to go elsewhere and get a better deal. Nicky Devlin's obviously moved on to Aberdeen, and we sponsored Nicky for the last 3 seasons, and we wish him the best of luck up at Aberdeen. Obviously not for the weekend coming up. Well, hopefully he's still got a big enough soft spot for us that he can stick one in the back of his own net to help the Lions get up and running for the season. But yeah, obviously wish Nicky the best of luck. As far as I'm aware, I don't think Jack Fitzwater's found a new club yet, so hopefully Fitzy can get himself sorted out. And I think Stefan Omionga is going away to Israel, which is a wee bit of a different move for him. So, but yeah, guys like Jackson Longridge have come in. I think his move back to Livingston didn't really materialise for him, but I think obviously wish Jacko the best of luck. He featured against us for Hamilton Accies and was very solid playing at centre back. Then you've got kind of the younger players that have moved on, the likes of Brian Schweik. I think everyone at Livi, every Livingston fan was hoping that Brian could come in and make an impact at some point in his time with the club. Obviously, he left America to come over here. He's done the groundwork, going to places like Linlithgow Rose, Edinburgh City, Morton last year. And I believe he's gone out to a club in Spain. And yeah. I think we've waived a kind of development fee and they're just looking at a potential sell on for Brian. But again, wish him the best of luck. Jace Kabaya, it just didn't work out at all. He kind of started off very well, obviously getting Scott Brown sent off and scored a couple of goals early doors when he first broke into the side, when he came across from Ireland. But he's had a couple of loan spells, which again, very much kind of the same. He started off very well in the loan spells and kind of drifted away. So unfortunate for him. I think there is a player in there. There is a bit of talent there, but it's just not really worked out. And then Jack Hamilton's another one. It's just never really worked out. He's never really kicked on from these loan spells when he's came back to us, and he's going to Wraith Rovers again. I think we've taken some form of fee for Jack Hamilton plus a potential sell-on fee further down the line. And I think Jack's at this point, as a young player, he just needs to get out playing games. And he's obviously been very successful in the Championship before, and he spells it like Arbroath. So for him, I think it's a very good move going to Wraith Rovers, who I think will probably kick on a wee bit this season as well. But what's kind of your thoughts on the departures, Angus?
Yeah, I think we were accustomed to most of them leaving. It's mainly, I guess, it's mainly those first 3 you're talking about is the kind of the biggest losses. Devlin, obviously, club captain. It's going to leave a big, kind of hole in the team. Just in terms of our personality and whatnot. Obviously, we've been fortunate enough sponsored them the last couple of seasons and know, not only how good the professional is, but just how good the guy he is as well. And that having somebody like that around the club and having somebody like that departing is always a big miss. And I think the same can be said for for Fitzwater and Omionga. Omionga in particular, is just such a good presence around the club, and I think it's somebody that probably should have featured a wee bit more last season. I really liked Omionga and thought that in terms of a midfield, he'd be one of my first names on a team sheet. But wish nothing but the best for them, and hopefully we've managed to replace him well enough. I think we just go straight into kind of talking about those who have came in. So obviously Michael Devlin's one that we've talked about quite a bit recently. Talking about those games, he stepped in to become basically the club captain. Again, if he can stay fit, that's a massive addition to our team. We've also got Miles Welch-Hayes, Mo Singar, and Michael Nottingham have came in as well. Initial thoughts on these players, Euan, even though we've probably only seen the first two kind of play for us to a good extent.
Yeah, Mikey Devlin's one that I think every Livingston fan would look at and go, on paper, very good signing if you can get him on the pitch. I think it's well documented his injury record over the last 3 to 4 years and the amount of minutes that he's managed to play. But I'm sure Mikey's absolutely desperate to get on the football pitch and playing regularly. You need to bear in mind that it wasn't that long ago that Steve Clarke was calling him into Scotland squad. So that tells you the calibre of a player that we've potentially got on our hands if we can get him on the pitch. I think the club have been wise in the contract offer they've given him. It's up to 3 years, but I think it's a year-by-year deal in which he needs to play a certain amount of games to activate an extension on the deal. So I think the club have been cautious with the contract offer that we've given him. Early signs, I think we've got a very good centre-back on our hands if, as I say, we can get him playing regularly and keep him fit. But a player that I would use almost as a bit of a comparison in terms of having an injury record when he signed for us was Scott Robinson. Scott Robinson had dropped down to part-time football because he'd been waiting on, I think it was a groin operation for 18 months or so. He'd ended up dropping down to part-time football with East Fife. We put him through that surgery, and Robbo's played over a third of his career games at Livingston in the space of 4 years. I think it was close to 120 games he played for Livingston over that 4-year spell. And now look at him after leaving us. He struggled at Kilmarnock for fitness. He's now going to Partick Thistle. And again, I wish him the best of luck because I thought he was fantastic at Livingston. But there's a comparison of how we managed a player and managed to get him out on the pitch on a regular basis and make a big impact for the football club. So I would use that as kind of your encouragement with Mikey Devlin. In terms of other players we've seen, Mo Sangare, I think Davey's been vocal in talking about how he's almost a direct replacement for Stefano Mionga. If you put the two of them side by side, you probably wouldn't instantly think that, because I think Mo Sangare's a lot more of a physical presence than Omionga was. But little flashes that I've seen of him, I think he maybe offers a little bit more going forward than Stefano Mionga did, which isn't a bad thing for our midfielders, because I don't think our midfielders have offered enough in an attacking sense in terms of goal input and assists and things like that. So maybe he can offer a little bit of that. And as I say, that kind of physical presence as well, I think can add to the team. But in terms of the other guys we've signed, Miles Welsh-Hayes, he's been brought in. I believe he's kind of seen as a backup almost to Jamie Brandon on the right-hand side. And then Michael Nottingham, I was actually aware of Michael Nottingham from watching a Salford documentary where the class of 92 guys from Manchester United, I think, signed him from non-league. He only turned professional at the age of 29. And listening to his interviews and things like that, I have to say he comes across like an absolutely top guy. And he seems very enthusiastic about the opportunity to come up to Livingston. So, he's quite encouraging. And again, he's a big physical presence as well, and an experienced player. So it's clear to see where Davies looked at this season. I think he's been looking at making us more solid, more difficult to break down, defending our box better. And you can see the likes of Devlin, Nottingham, Sangare, what they'll offer in that regard in terms of offering a bit more physicality in our 18-yard box.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we alluded to it earlier when we said about how, conceding 60 goals last year, the most goals that we conceded since coming back up to the top flight, and something needs to be remedied. With our budget as well, I think it's a lot easier for us to tighten up as opposed to, create more chances to bring in talent up front and try and go the opposite way and become more of an attacking side to make up for it as well. So I think that's a little bit smarter from Davey there. You're looking at our team though at the moment, and it does look a bit heavy towards the back. There is so many options who can play, centre back, or as opposed to, you're looking at the other side. And I think that's where, if anybody else is to come in, we've probably got to be bringing in forwards, right? And forwards or wingers, but again, the way Davey likes to work, that you're probably looking at a hybrid of the two, where somebody can probably do maybe a bit of both. Yeah, for us, I think is that the place that you'd say that still needs to be, identified for replacements, or to our people to come in to, help strengthen our squad to kind of bridge that gap from, where we've been in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I would say that we're still needing to add in that final third. Again, I think the manager's been public in saying that he wants to bring in one more offensive player. I do believe we're waiting on a work permit for Afala Teto, young South African boy who I'm sure those that are on the Facebook forum would have seen a picture that he is in the country, just kind of waiting on the final paperwork coming through for that.
I think you'll be happy because he'll be the only player that you're taller than, right?
Exactly. Yes, I feel like a giant, having seen the picture of little Afalele Teto, but hopefully he's a much better footballer than me. I tell you that. But yeah, obviously he's a potential attacking acquisition for us, but at the age of 20 coming over from South Africa, the likelihood of him coming in straight away and making an instant impact is probably limited. He's probably deemed more of a development project, but having spoke to the manager about him, Davey gave him a glowing reference. So for those who want to tune into that and kind of hear his thoughts on him, I would encourage you to do so. Obviously, you've still got the likes of Stephen Bradley, who's not featured a lot in pre-season, to still come in. He offers a lot in kind of versatility across the kind of front three. And given what I saw from him from January onwards last year, I think he can kick on again this year and offer us a little bit more in that kind of final third as well. But yeah, that would be maybe the one area that you would look at trying to add in. I would like to see us have a genuine, proper backup to Bruce Anderson. I know the fans have been very critical of Curtis Guthrie. I'm certainly not one of these ones who would boo one of my own players, but I've seen that's kind of the response that he's got. I actually think he did okay when he came on up at Cove and did all right at the weekend against Clyde, but I think the fans would like to see somebody that can really push Bruce on a little bit.
I think the interesting thing is, to be honest, is that if Bruce Anderson gets the service, I think he'll score goals. And I think that could be a way of looking at it. And it's like trying to bring in players to supplement him, because we've seen it in that first season that, goal scoring was great. Last season, I think that, I feel really sorry for him last season, in all honesty, because the amount of games that, maybe didn't start, or, the chances he did get to start would go down to 10 men, or like something would happen like that. Or just in general, like how poor we were attacking last season. I think this season we kind of already shown that, he's got 3 goals straight away, some good finishes in there. And, I think he is that kind of player. If you keep on giving the chances to, then, he will get you the goals. There's not anybody else like that in the team. And I think that for the shape viewing, that's going to be the interesting aspect of it, because with the kind of the 2 number 10s and behind, they've been kind of flirting with putting Newbley and Anderson into one of those positions and Miller being up top. And I think that the more effective has certainly been Anderson through the middle, which, I don't think Newbley's been quite as effective in that kind of number 10 position, because I think that he is a natural wide player. He's kind of drifting into those spaces that the wing backs are now wanting to occupy. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that's handled. Maybe somebody who can handle that kind of area a little bit better could do us a world of good. But I think that, I think one of the pre-season friendlies, Stephen Bradley came into that area as well. And I think that the three effectively of Anderson, Kelly and Bradley could actually be quite an exciting one, the way they like to knock the ball about one another, kind of like one-touch kind of stuff, get kind of shots away. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see what happens with the rest of the transfer window, as 2 of those players, Bruce Anderson, has been linked with a move away to Georgia, as well as the ever-round and ever-floating rumour of Joel Newbley moving on as well. I think that for safety in this as well, another target needs to be identified in some way in case one of them does move, or even if one of them gets injured, because we'll be quite short for numbers, because it doesn't look as if the likes of Ishmael Gonsalves is going to get much of a sniff in this season. Going into Guthrie probably still somebody who's trying to find his feet up here. Realistically, going into a new season, we'd hope for a couple more options. But I guess by reaching the point that, the opening day of the season, Anderson and Newbley are here, I think I would like to hope that means that they're both here for the season. We're going to use them to kind of keep us up, hopefully keep us up for this season, and then they can move on there I don't know if it'd be worth, taking a fee for them. Would we be able to put that money straight back in the club to find a replacement just as good? Maybe not. So maybe in the long run, their value keeping us in the league could possibly be a lot more than any potential money up front right now.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned there, kind of going on to talk about a couple of rumours that have come about. One wasn't really a rumour, it was Bruce Anderson. There was an offer came in from a club in Georgia. I believe a reasonable offer. I'm going to guess a ballpark a couple 100,000, given that Bruce is out of contract at the end of the season. I think it would have came as a big surprise to most fans. And then when you actually dig a little deeper into the club that had made the offer, Steve Keane is the manager there. So I think the Scottish connection makes it make a lot more sense than just a random Georgia club looking at a boy from Banff. But yeah, obviously Bruce was given the opportunity to speak to them, and he's obviously decided to stay at Livingston. I think a lot of fans had resigned themselves to the fact that Bruce was going to go out there, but you need to bear in mind that living in Georgia, the lifestyle is a lot different. Yes, you might be earning a little bit more money, but your lifestyle takes a big hit in that regard as well. And again, you need to look at Bruce being out of contract at the end of the season. If Bruce can go in and hit double figures for us this season again, like he did in his first campaign, he's getting a much better move than a move to Georgia, in my opinion. And he's already kicked off the season pretty well with 3 goals so far. So he's kind of well on target to hitting that. Joel Newbley, I've lost count of how many different rumours I've seen with regards to Joel Newbley. I think Davey was talking about clubs in France that have spoken about him, clubs down south have spoken about him, clubs up here have spoken about him. But I'm confident that Joel's still going to be hanging about come the end of the transfer window. But I think you need to look back to Lyndon Dykes as an example of what can potentially happen in the month of August. His deal to QPR happened quite late on in the transfer window. And then you're looking at trying to replace a key player as the season's already kicked off. And you've not got the same ability for them to kind of settle into the squad. They needed to almost hit the ground running a little bit. And I think we ended up trying to go for Anthony Stokes, and then J. Emmanuel Thomas came in that period as well as the kind of replacements for Dykes for the season. So I agree with you, Angus. Is it one of those ones where you go and take that instant transaction in terms of the fee? It's been well documented about the budget cuts. Do the club try and plug that gap and take the gamble, or do you gamble on the fact that you keep those 2 players for the season and they're potentially the difference between being in the top flight for a 7th season in a row or looking at potential championship football? It's a big gamble for the club either way.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I think that, even just the kind of camera nerves and everything like that, I think we'd just like to see a kind of attacking player come in. I think, that's been, talked about for a while, but still about a month to go of the transfer window. Hopefully somebody can come in and, we can look into, how the season's going to progress. But yeah, is there anywhere else you kind of think of that maybe needs a little bit of strengthening up, or how are you feeling? Or what's just your general thoughts of the squad going into the first game of the season this weekend?
I think I agree with you. We're maybe a bit heavy towards our back 3 in terms of cover there. I think if you assess the squad, you've probably got 7 players in total that can cover the back 3. Is there a possibility that Davey might look to move 1, maybe even 2 of them on? I don't know. I don't know what his thought process is there. I think it's well documented. There's a couple of players he's made it clear to them that they don't have a future and they can go and look for first team football opportunities elsewhere. Ones that you mentioned there, the likes of Ismail Calvi, Scott Bitsindu, I think are guys that have been told that they can look for a new club. So yeah, I think it's a case of that we're going to need to move on 1 or 2 in order to accommodate bringing in options elsewhere. But is it maybe worthwhile looking at the loan market? We've talked about our budget constraints. I know a couple of seasons back, the loan market was very much hit or miss for us. I think Odin Bailey you could put down as really the only hit out of those loan signings. I think we had Sebastian Soto, Chukwuemeka, Adam Lewis, who I think Adam Lewis was more just unlucky with injuries when he was with us. But is it maybe worth exploring that option again?
Yeah, possibly. So I think, whether that be, maybe going back to Rangers and seeing, do you guys have anybody who, you're looking to to give minutes to and that. We've had some decent success with that in the past. Like Ryan Hardy, Liam Kelly, Craig Halkett back then at times, Jordan Thompson, even like Robbie McCrory, if depending on what side of the fence you sit on. I think Ben Williamson was even quite unlucky as well. But since then, we've not really had one, and I think that's a manager who Davey has, a good relationship with. I know I've seen the boy Alex Lowry, who's been somebody who's been waited for a loan move. I know that's a midfielder, but he's somebody who could be maybe an attacking option that, you could get him in on the cheap. It's a good quality addition, even just for rotation. Him and Stephen Kelly probably play together at youth level and that as well. A little bit of good chemistry there. It could maybe not be a too terrible option. And then, maybe looking elsewhere, maybe down south, is there any strikers or that playing their trade, wanting to break into the team or something like that. I think at this kind of stage, we'd maybe be best off doing that. Are we going to bring anybody in on decent wages or anything like that? Possibly not. So if you managing to get somebody who's playing playing and training at a better level to come in, and as long as they're committed, I think that's the kind of thing that we're talking about for most of these kind of young players. The likes of Odin Bailey, somebody who came in, kind of got their head down, started working. Whereas like Chukwuemeka, even if you kind of really could be cared, it kind of seems if you're strutting around the place as if it didn't really matter. I think as long as the attitude's right, hopefully we can kind of get something out of that. But yeah, I think I agree with you there. It's been a while since we've had somebody join us on loan or that. I don't know if maybe the past experience has put us off of it, but yeah, wouldn't be worth harm.
Well, as you say, there's still a month left of the window. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of activity, and I'm sure for a few Livingston fans it could be pretty nervy coming up to the end of the month, hopefully keeping a hold of a couple of our more sellable assets in the forms of the likes of Bruce Anderson, Joe Newbley. But hopefully we'll have a nice settled squad come the end of August, and a squad that's capable of keeping us in the Premiership for a sixth consecutive season. I'm delighted to welcome friend of the podcast and Red Tinted Glasses host Glen Schreuder back on to talk Livi. Glen, how you doing? You enjoyed the summer?
Yeah, Euan, thanks for the invite back for another season, and it's been a nice break, but raring to go. I'm sure you guys are as well.
Yeah, exactly. And you would have been happy with the Scotland result over the winter. Summer break. I don't know how I came out with winter there when I was sitting in the away end in Oslo and it was like 32 degrees.
Yeah, I think I was getting sunburnt just watching it on the telly. I'm sure you got sunburnt being there as well. But this summer break, I've been planning the European trips, not to rub it in for any Livi fans tuning in, but I'm sure next summer I'll be celebrating in Germany, fingers crossed with each other.
Here's hoping. But last time we spoke was just after Barry Robson had taken interim charge at Aberdeen just before the game that you guys beat us 1-0 up at Pittodrie. It's safe to say he'd certainly turned your fortunes around.
Yeah, he did. I don't know if you could say nobody saw it coming, but what a job he did coming in with a lot of pressure on. Obviously, the board backed him to go and deliver third place, and that was his target, and he met that and made us hard to beat. Because I think it was fair to say under Jim Goodwin, we were, despite his claims of fixing the defence, the easiest way to fix it was him leaving. But we were also beginning to score goals as well. And I'm interested to see this season because there'll be a pressure on Barry Robson this season because of what he delivered at the back end of last season. And he's kind of got to go and match that again this season in a full season with being able to put his own stamp on the squad as well.
Yeah, I would say a big part in your run towards the end of last season were the signings of Matty Pollock and Angus MacDonald, and you obviously switched that back three, kind of regularly played that under Barry Robson. Just how big a difference did they make?
Oh, unbelievable difference. I mean, it was night and day to what we were seeing before. It was just, and I think as well though, the biggest difference was we weren't asking defenders to play from the back. We were just asking them to be defenders. It was no nonsense football, and that's kind of what we needed. They made a huge difference. I think the biggest difference though will be the fact that there's still question marks around Angus MacDonald's fitness for this weekend's game, and obviously Matty Pollock's still at Watford, so both of them missing. But we've made some additions to the back line, and they've got to live up to what both Matty and Angus produced last season.
Yeah, I did commentary on the game at Pittodrie, and they were both playing, and that was the kind of thing I was saying is they're just defenders that defend. They just kick and head things that came in front of them, and dare I say it, Barry Robson's side kind of reminiscent of a McInnes like Aberdeen.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely drew comparisons to that ourselves, especially if you look at, probably prime McInnes, if you want to call it that, where we were just winning 1-0, and that's felt like what we were doing in the last games of last season. We weren't really putting teams to the sword. We weren't putting teams away. We were just doing what we needed to do, stopping the other team scoring and putting the ball in the net ourselves. So, yeah, there are shades of comparisons, but the recruitment is a lot more exotic than what Derek McInnes is used to.
That's probably a fair point. I would give you that one. But this would end up resulting in a third place finish for Aberdeen and guaranteed European football, be that through the Europa League or the Conference League. How would you assess Aberdeen's season overall last year?
I mean, it was certainly a roller coaster. That'd be the easiest way to describe it. We were sitting high in third, and then probably had the worst few weeks of our history in December and January. And then, you come away finishing third and guaranteeing yourself 8 European games going into this season. It's quite remarkable. I mean, if you said to me at the beginning of last season we would have finished third, I'd have bit your hand off. If we did it in the manner, if you told me we were going to do it in the manner we did, I wouldn't have believed you at all. So it was crazy, but ultimately we got where we would have expected to be come the end of the season.
Whenever I speak to you, the kind of overall aim at Aberdeen, isn't it? It's third place and being competitive in the cup competitions. And granted, you maybe didn't have the competitive edge in the cup competitions. We won't go into detail on that, but obviously getting third place it's massive for the football club, because it's that, as you say, it's that guaranteed 8 European games. And we'll come on to speak about my beloved Nicky Devlin later on, I'm sure. But that was a big factor in why Nicky wanted to go to Aberdeen, was the fact that he would, for the first time in his career, have the opportunity to play guaranteed European football.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was. I'm just disappointed that we couldn't carry on the tradition of a podcast sponsoring Nicky Devlin. Unfortunately, I didn't have a spare $3,500 lying around.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that makes ours sound really cheap. But
yeah,
it's been a busy summer at Aberdeen as well, with kind of the recruitment, as you mentioned there. I think it's 8 new arrivals.
8 from yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, including tying down Leighton Clarkson on a permanent deal. What have you made of what you've seen of the new arrivals so far in pre-season?
I mean, obviously you've got Graham Shinney and Leighton Clarkson in there as some of the summer signings, and we know what to expect from them, having seen them last season. Nicky Devlin is an interesting one, because personally I don't think he's being played in his favoured position. He's being played on the right of a back three. And personally, I think he'd be better on the right wing back role potentially, but he's looked very impressive. I said on our last episode, and then I was praying you weren't tuning in, that could he handle playing for a club like Aberdeen, having come from a club like Livingston with obviously the greatest of respect. Obviously, we've played 2 Highland League teams before going down to England twice in pre-season, and he really stood out in that Charlton game, the way he was marshalling young Jack Milne in defence. So he's having to deal with young inexperienced players to one side, and Shaden Morris, who was playing right wing back in pre-season so far, a player inexperienced in that role. So his leadership qualities are certainly coming to the fore, and I've been really impressed with his communication amongst that back line as well. Rhys Williams, unfortunately, has picked up an injury, so we've not really been able to see him other than 45 minutes against Turriff. Ross Doohan, same, has only got sparing minutes against Fraserburgh, and I think he might have come on against Preston. And then we signed Slobodan Rubizic last night, which was Monday. So where he is in terms of his pre-season, not sure, and I do suspect he might come into the game this weekend, and I'm interested to see what role other defender that we signed at the end of last week, or Dadia, who's a right-sided defender, will play. So again, probably somebody to play alongside Nicky Devlin.
There is an element with a couple of signings, as you mentioned, a bit more exotic than maybe the recruitment going back to kind of the days of Derek McInnes. So there's that kind of air of unknown quantity with maybe a couple of signings, would it be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I realised I missed Esther Sockler out as well, who of course made some impact in his first game for the club, who, scoring 4 goals in 45 minutes. Again, caveat that with the fact it was Turriff United from the Highland League, but he's looked physical, he's looked quick, good first touch as well, looks very much like Bojan Mijovski in terms of looks, but has maybe a different sort of game to Bojan. I was quite critical of Bojan's hold-up play and pace in the early part of last season, and Esther seems to have both what Bojan was certainly lacking last season. So we've added an extra threat up top this season, but we've also added quite a lot of height in our recruitment, which is something I felt we were lacking in seasons gone by.
Obviously, to touch on Nicky Devlin, it would be rude of us not to obviously delve into Nicky's signing for Aberdeen, and kind of how you mentioned there, he's been playing the right side of a back three. I know he did play in that position a handful of times with us, where maybe did switch system, but given that you guys, I think, are probably still playing that back three, as you mentioned, as a wing back, it's almost like a tailor-made role for Nicky. So do you reckon further down the line he's going to get the opportunity to move that little bit further forward?
Yeah, well, again, I guess that's the interesting thing with the signing of Ordadia, and it will be what Robson sees, who's the preferred right wing back and right centre back in that back three, or whether, given Orr's experience in European football with Hapoel Beersheva, where we signed him on loan from, he's maybe more preferred to European exploits, and we reserve Nicky for domestic rights in that right wing back. I think given the fact that Nicky's played on the right-hand side of a back three in pre-season, is probably more likely where we're going to see him. I'm just more of a fan of playing players in their preferred positions and not out of position, which is why I would personally like to see Nicky on the right wing-back role from an Aberdeen point of view, because we saw last season for Livingston what he can do in the forward areas as well as defensively.
Yeah, he's kind of an all-action fullback. He's kind of that modern-day fullback who loves to bomb forward at every opportunity when he can. And
yeah,
obviously from ourselves on the podcast, wish Nicky the best of luck. Just maybe not for Saturday. I've already dropped him a message to ask if he can stick one in the back of his own net just to get the Lions up and running for the season. But we've also had a former Aberdeen player sign over the course of the summer. Like, we didn't want to spend any money on reprinting a shirt. We've signed Mikey Devlin.
Yeah.
Now, Mikey Devlin spent a few years at Aberdeen. Could you give us a little bit of background of what we can expect from Mikey?
You're probably barking up the wrong tree, because it's a player that I was not a big fan of. I think that's maybe a slightly harsh as well, but purely down to his poor run of injuries. And without speaking about the pitch in question, it was a signing that did surprise me, given how poor his injuries were at his time of Aberdeen. He came to Aberdeen highly rated from Hamilton, but just never cut a break. So for me personally, wasn't a player that I really ever rated, but when he came in, did a job, unfortunately, just wasn't reliable enough to do it consistently, through obviously no fault of his own with his injuries. So yeah, but it was a surprising signing, but I'm glad to see that he's still, staying in the Premiership, because there was probably fear from his side that we might have to drop down a few divisions to get regular game time.
Yeah, it's obviously, I think, regardless of what football club was signing them, regardless of the surface, I think that's probably the big question mark, and it's the big question mark we have is, I think, bear in mind, it was only a few years ago that he was being called up by Steve Clarke for Scotland.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a player in there, and it's a case of whether we get him out on the pitch. We spoke about this, me and Angus, earlier on, that we've protected ourselves, I think, a little bit with his contract. I think it totals up to 3 years, but it's a year by year where it's triggered by appearances. So he has to be on the pitch in order to trigger that. So we've obviously taken into account his track record with injuries over recent years. So hopefully he kind of is past the worst of that and he can get back out on the pitch playing regularly, and hopefully makes an impact for ourselves as well in the process of doing that. But looking ahead to the game on Saturday, we've spoken about it a little bit, but how can we expect the Dons to probably line up in terms of their shape, still sticking with that back three that was successful second half of last season?
Yeah, I suspect, given what we've seen in pre-season, there was times I certainly thought that we went to a back four in the second half of games, certainly the first two games, and we're trying more of a 4-4-2. But I suspect we'll start the game in that 3-5-2 formation with the fullbacks. Still not sure how defensively we're going to line up. Reece Williams has been confirmed as being out of the game by Barry Robson and Angus MacDonald. He hopes will be fit for the weekend. So that means potentially Sloban coming in for his debut, or we go with young Jack Milne, who of course was on loan at Kelty Hearts last season. He's been playing centre back in pre-season, so I'm a bit concerned about Jack Milne coming up against Joel Nouble, if that is what we go with, or Slobodan gets his debut. And then I suspect the other big talking point for our Aberdeen fans this week, and obviously Livi fans tuning in, will be the transfer speculation surrounding Yilba Ramadani and whether or not he will feature in the middle of the park, which, if he doesn't, given his absence from the Charlton pre-season, would see the return of Dante Polvara to the middle of the park, who spent the back end of last season and part of this summer on loan at Charleston Battery, which I think was the equivalent of the MLS Championship. So he's certainly match fit and looking a lot sharper. Johnny Hayes, I think, called him our secret weapon for this season. And I suspect then Duka Miowski to line up front, but Robson saying, he's got a bit of a selection headache with Esther Sokler up there as well. So I suspect we'll come with a 3-5-2 and look to continue the high press, which seems to be the buzzword used from Barry Robson in his press conferences, and look to transition the ball, using another key phrase of Barry's. And that seems to be our method just now, is to press teams up high up the park and hit them on the counter when they're a bit ragdolled almost. And we saw that against Charlton in the last pre-season game, albeit probably took our foot off the gas and obviously made the changes in the second half as well. So I'm sure we'll look to come with a high intensity and press Livingston from the start, backed on by huge travelling support. First day of the season, there's going to be a lot of excitement from both sets of fans. You want to start the season well, and I think all the pressure is going to be on Barry and Aberdeen, because probably people are expecting Aberdeen to win that game. We've got Celtic coming up after, so we're going to want to put the points on the board straight away.
Yeah, well, likewise for ourselves, we go to Ibrox the following week. So, yeah, both teams will be looking to get something on the board from the game. But you mentioned about the kind of style of play. Who are the kind of real danger men? You're talking about that try to hit us on the break. Surely the likes of Duke and Miowski are still the kind of main danger men for Aberdeen in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think you'd be foolish not to name them as the danger men. Obviously, Leighton Clarkson will probably be looking to pull the strings in midfield. I've been really impressed with Dante Polvara as well throughout pre-season with some of his range of passing. He's got himself, I think, two or at least two, possibly three assists. Shaden Morris is a threat down that right if he does play or does start that game at right wing back. For me, my only criticism of Shaden is his final product is still slightly lacking, and maybe chooses the wrong option, but he certainly has the pace to burn and get in behind. And once he gets in behind, if he can find that right ball, then we're on to something. It's just whether he can do that or not. So for me, that right-hand side, which obviously for your sake will contain Nicky Devlin, will be probably our side most likely to cause Livingston problems, or look to cause Livingston problems, I should say.
And where do you think Livingston can potentially cause Aberdeen problems? You've mentioned a wee bit about a bit of uncertainty in terms of the back three. Is that maybe a possibility to cause Aberdeen a few problems?
Yeah, 100%. For me, the biggest concern going into this weekend is still around defensively. Yes, I've mentioned the signings that we've made, but the problem is that they've not been able to spend much time with their teammates, certainly in match day scenarios. But my biggest concern is down that left-hand side. It's where Preston got their success a couple of weeks ago. Jack McKenzie, for me, is still a weak point in our defence. And as I mentioned, depending on if Jack Milne will feature or not, who's played centre-half, I'm still unsure on that one. But yeah, certainly defensively, it is going to be where I'm sure Joel and Bruce look to get some success this weekend.
And if you had to go for a prediction, Glenn, what are you going for? Are you going for a confident opening day win?
Well, I've not mentioned it yet, but the surface can throw up those surprises.
There we go. The buzzwords in.
I know. Well, I was doing well not to mention it. No, I think I'm going to say 2-1 Aberdeen.
2-1 Aberdeen. I mean, you can't come on the opposition's podcast and predict a defeat of that, can you?
No,
really?
I can't. No.
But in terms of what you're expecting for the season, I'm going to hazard a guess. It's the kind of same remit as always, which is being third place and progressing into the latter stages of the Cups for Aberdeen.
Yeah, if we could play more than one Scottish Cup game this season, that would be progress. But yeah, I think we've got to be realistic this season. Third has to be the ambition, but obviously with the fact that we saw with Hearts last season how much a European run pre-Christmas can impact you, I think as long as we're still sitting in the top 6 going into the winter break, I'll be happy, and then you can assess from there, because in an ideal situation we would progress out of our European group stage depending where we are. But yeah, a significant run in the Scottish Cup would be something I'm looking for this season, because we had the semi-final in the League Cup last season, but let's be honest, everyone cares more about the Scottish Cup than we do the League Cup.
Exactly, and we've had opposition fans on recently, and what we've been asking them to do is to come up with a player that's played for both football clubs, someone that you have fond memories of, and then someone who you maybe don't have such fond memories of. So we'll start off with a good one first. Who gives you fond memories that's represented both clubs?
Well, we were speaking about this pre-recording as well, and one player that you mentioned was Manuel Pascali, and of course he gives me fond memories from scoring the winner at Parkhead as well, although I'm sure if there's some Aberdeen
You
fans
mean Fernando Pasquinelli?
Yeah. And then Steve Tosh, just because he's an absolute basket case, and I personally loved him in our midfield, and he was a great guest on the show as well. Really, when he said he was an open book, he wasn't lying, and he was definitely our most edited player interview as well.
I'm not surprised. Like Steve Tosh, I just remember him. He's a nut job. He's an absolute nutter, but a good nutter at the same time. Like,
he's a nutter you'd want on your side.
Exactly. He's a great character. He had 2 spells at Livingston. We signed him from Wraith Rovers, and it was when we were in the first division. And I think we signed, was it Paul Burns, Steve Tosh, and Marvin Andrews from Wraith Rovers in one go. And Tosh played maybe 18 months, and he came back to us when we had been demoted down to the third division. And I fondly remember Steve Tosh already being bluttered on the pitch when we got presented with the third division trophy. And how he made Player of the Year, I'll never know. But those are my fond
I think
memories.
You asked me
of Steve Tosh.
I'm sure you asked me to ask him that when he came on the podcast as well.
But I'd encourage anyone who, Livingston fans as well, to go back and listen to that interview with Steve Tosh, because he has a lot of very good things to say about Livingston in that interview too. But in terms of a player that you have not so fond memories of, I can probably guess who's coming. But
do you? I'm sure everyone knows who's coming, and it's got to be Jet. I mean, how we managed to get the worst end of that deal, I'll never know.
Jet's so frustrating, because I also came on your podcast, and I don't know if the fact that Jet had that kind of 3-month spell at the end of the season for us, where he scored a couple of cracking goals up at Pittodrie and then won against you at Livi as well in that run, and scored a brilliant volley, and so you could clearly see the quality that the guy had if you could get him playing. And I mind coming on your podcast, and I must have well oversold him, because I was getting slaughtered by your fans every time I came back on talking about Jet. But it was one of those ones where I was like, look, he's not going to go and run channels for you. He's not going to go and press a fullback. He's not going to go and do this. You need to just accept that he will saunter about the pitch. That's just who he is. That's the type of player he is. But if you allow him to do that and give him a bit of freedom, he can be very good for you. And when he was with us, like, you could clearly see the guy had technical ability, but it just did not work at Aberdeen, did it?
Yeah, no, he had a couple of bright moments in the European games, but they were very fleeting. I mean, I'm probably remembered for his miss against Edinburgh City in the Scottish Cup, where he scooped it over from under the crossbar. But hey, look, he enjoyed the golf courses when he was up here, so at least he enjoyed his time here. If we didn't enjoy watching him.
And as you say, we got a very good end of the deal with Brucey Anderson coming up here, and he's already bagged 20 goals for us in the last couple of years. So
yeah, and I'm
we're
sure he'll
quite
be
happy
looking
with
to
it.
noise up, or well, he'll be looking to quieten a noisy support this weekend.
I'm sure he'll have the bit between his teeth. But Glenn, as always, thank you for coming back on. For anyone that wants to tune into your kind of post-match reaction and your previews as well, let everyone know where they can tune in.
Yeah, so I'm not sure when this episode is going out, but we are going to be live on the Red Tinted Glasses YouTube channel on Wednesday night at 7 or 7:30. Certainly more looks like 7:30. To preview the weekend's encounter with Livingston. I think you and you're going to be joining us on that show as well. Yeah. And then we will have a reaction episode out at some point, but all episodes are also available on your usual audio platforms wherever you listen to podcasts as well.
Well, Glenn, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. It's always a pleasure catching up with you, and best of luck for the season, except for Saturday, obviously.
Yeah, pleasure to be back on Talk Livi, and all the best for this season, as I said, apart from Saturday.
That's it for this week's episode of Talk Livi. Thanks again to every single one of you for tuning in, week out, and for the start of a new season as well. If you can, we'd love to hear your feedback. Either leave us a review on iTunes or simply message us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
As Euan said, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so search Talk Livi to find us, and you'll find all the links to our weekly episodes on there as well. You can also find all of our episodes, including this one, and all good podcast streaming sites, including iTunes and Spotify. We're also on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel. None of those options suit you. All you have to do is head to our website, talklivipodcast.libsyn.com, where you'll find every single episode we've done over the last few years.
That's it for this week, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in as always. And let's hope for a fantastic season following the Lothian's finest football team.
West Lothian is our battle cry. This is the place from which we hail. Livingston, oh Livingston, it's up to Amberville. Livingston, 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 oh Livingston, oh Livingston, we love it when you score. Livingston, oh Livingston, the Amberville Lions roar. Livingston, oh Livingston, we realize our vision. Livingston, oh Livingston, into the